Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this Kuits webinar. My name is Tom Fairhurst. I'm a marketing executive at Kuits, and I'll be your host for this licensing and leisure update. For those of you who aren't overly familiar with Kuits, we're an award-winning independent law firm based in Manchester City Centre. And the subject of the webinar this afternoon is looking at the return of the suburbs. So we're giving you an update on the leisure and hospitality world at the moment, and also what it's looking like in a post-lockdown world. And we'll take you through the agenda for that in a second. So just quickly, since the pandemic has hit, Kuits have been advising our licensing and leisure clients on a number of challenges and concerns. I don't want to go into these to go into any great detail on these at the moment, but just to say that we have been offering some of our clients employment advice, property advice, and advice on commercial contracts as well. So, yeah, we just wanted to flag our wider offering and say, if you've got any questions or any queries in any of those areas, we'd obviously be happy to speak to you and offer you any advice you might need. So, on to the webinar this afternoon. So we have three panelists for you today. We have two of my colleagues from Kuits who may be familiar faces to you. So we have Felicity Tulloch, who's partner and head of our licensing team, and also Rebecca Ingram, who's an associate in our licensing team. And then thirdly, we have Lyndon Higginson, who may also be a familiar face to a number of you, certainly in the Manchester scene. Lyndon's going to be doing a Q&A for us later on. For those of you who don't know Lyndon, he's owner of a variety of premises and establishments in Manchester, including Junkyard Golf, Crazy Pedros and the Liars Club. And we thank Lyndon for being here, and hopefully it will be an entertaining Q&A with him. So just quickly take you through the timeline for this webinar. So just quickly, I'm going to take you through some ways to connect with Kuits moving forward and a short piece of housekeeping. Becky's then going to give us a legal update, just looking at the Business and Planning Act and some local authority closure powers that have come out in the last few days. And then Felicity is going to talk briefly about cumulative impact policies. And then later on, Felicity's going to do an interview with Lyndon. And we're going to have a bit of a Q&A, and then finally there'll be an opportunity for everybody on the webinar to ask questions and put those to Lyndon and Becky and Felicity. So just quickly, there's a variety of ways you can connect with us at Kuits, and all the contact details on this screen can be found on our website, which is kuits.com. Just wanted to additionally flag as well that we have 3 outlets for social media: Twitter, LinkedIn, and also YouTube. Our YouTube channel is relatively new, but we have got some previous licensing and leisure updates on that channel, and also an interview with Marcello Di Stefano from San Carlo, who was interviewed by executive partner recently, and again, similar to the one that we'll be doing with Lyndon today. That was a really useful insight and something that you might want to look up. And just some short housekeeping as we move forward into this webinar. So, like I said, when it gets to the Q&A stage with Lyndon, there will be opportunities to ask questions, whether that's of Lyndon or whether it's anything we mentioned in this webinar. You can do that. There should be a tab at the bottom of your screen where you can ask any questions. We are recording this webinar with a view to putting it out on YouTube and social media after this. So, when asking questions, obviously, if they're quite sensitive, please feel free to keep that anonymous. And then later, after the webinar, like I said, we'll be looking to send this recording around. You will be receiving a follow-up email. In that email, you will get a copy of the recording and also some other content that we've recently put out based on things mentioned in this webinar today. Once you get that email, if you found this interesting or you think you have any friends or colleagues who might find this useful, please feel free to forward it to them as well. And that is it from me for now. So I'm going to switch over to Felicity, who's going to come in and introduce the Kuits licensing team. Felicity.
Thanks, Tom, and afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. For those who don't know us, the Kuits licensing team acts for a wide range of operators, not just in Manchester, but up and down the country, from small independent, single site operators to national chains of bars and restaurants, cinemas, theatres, and everything in between. And we just specialise, Becky and I just specialise in the licensing aspects of those sorts of businesses. It's obviously been a really challenging few months for the hospitality sector as a whole. It was the first to really suffer as the pandemic began, and it's only now just starting to emerge out of the other side. And there are still elements of the sector that remain closed. Nightclubs, for example, still don't have a date yet for when they can reopen. So it is very difficult, but there are some green shoots emerging. Hopefully the interview with Lyndon will be positive and upbeat, yet frank and honest. So I'm looking forward to that. But Becky, to start with, is going to run through a couple of changes in legislation that have happened. Just last week, the Business and Planning Act was brought in, and that has some real benefits to licensed premises. So she'll be detailing the provisions within that. And then going through some of the closure powers that local authorities have just been given by central government to tackle local flare-ups of COVID and dealing with local lockdowns, and how those powers might impact on how operators trade in the coming weeks and months. So if I'll just hand over to Becky and she'll take you through those couple of points.
Yeah, thank you, Felicity. Hi again, everyone. Yeah, thanks for joining us this afternoon. So yeah, as Felicity said, there have been a number of fairly significant changes over the past few weeks. So I'm just going to give you an overview of those and how they might affect you if you're a licensed operator. So the first of those that Felicity mentioned was the Business and Planning Act. This was fairly long awaited. We saw the Business and Planning Bill, so the proposals for this back at the start of July, but it was only in late July that we saw this come through Parliament and eventually receive Royal Assent. It was something that I think a lot in the industry were talking about pre-July. It was something that we were discussing as something would be necessary to help operators as they started to reopen. To deal with the sort of social distancing requirements placed on operators across the sector. So the Business and Planning Act has introduced some really useful relaxations for operators that will help in a number of ways. So the first of those is a relaxation on off sales. So the permission for customers to purchase alcohol from inside your premises and then take it away with them, be that to take home, or be that to drink in an outside area, either attached to or near to a licensed premises. So the Business and Planning Act provides a relaxation in that any premises that prior to this act had only an on licence is automatically granted an off licence as well. There's nothing that needs to be done in order to allow that to take effect for your premises. It is an automatic relaxation. This applies until 11 o'clock daily for most premises, subject to a couple of caveats that I'll mention, and it will last until September 2021. So fairly lengthy relaxation, which should be helpful for a number of operators. It doesn't apply to off licenses in a converse way. So we're not going to suddenly see Tesco's offering people the opportunity to sit and open a bottle of wine inside. So it is solely to add off sales to existing on licenses. What it also does is that for any sites that previously did already have off sales, so that's both on and off sales, it relaxes certain conditions which may have restricted the operation of that. So it's fairly common to see on licenses conditions which restrict alcohol being sold, for example, in open containers. It may require anything that's for an off sale to be in a sealed container. Any such conditions on licenses prior to this act coming into force are now disapplied. And similarly, any conditions which restrict delivery of alcohol are disapplied. So operators can take advantage of third-party delivery providers like Deliveroo, or they can create a delivery service themselves, even if there are any conditions that were previously on their license which would have restricted that. Now, this doesn't apply to any premises that have specifically had off sales refused to them in the 3 years prior to this act being introduced. So if any premises has tried to add off sales and there's been a reason why they've been refused that permission, then this won't apply to them. It also doesn't apply in relation to certain hours for certain premises. So whilst the relaxation is generally until 11 p.m, if a premises has any existing conditions which would restrict the use of an outdoor area, so for example, they've got a condition which says that their beer garden should not be used for alcohol consumption after a certain time, say 9 o'clock, then the relaxation on off sales would not apply for those last 2 hours for that particular premises. But otherwise, yeah, fairly wide-ranging relaxation, which should be useful to allow operators to diversify, to perhaps use additional outdoor space, or to bring in a delivery offering. With that does, though, come review powers for the authorities. So whilst this is granted automatically to everyone, it can be removed from operators if there are problems with that. So it's something that operators should approach fairly cautiously, think about ensuring it's not causing any problems, because they don't want that right taken away from them. But otherwise, something that's really useful, hopefully. And that goes hand in hand then with the introduction of a new type of licence, which is to be known as a pavement licence. So what this will do is allow operators to place tables, chairs and other sorts of furniture out on a public highway. Now, operators have been able to do that previously, but they've had to do that through the Highways Act licensing process, which can be fairly onerous, it can be fairly lengthy. They've also then had to obtain planning permission as separate to that. And in some areas in London, also street trading permission. So what this new pavement licence does is deems the grant of planning permission and excludes street trading from any operation over this type of use. So it's only one licence that would now be needed to place furniture out on the highway, and the process for applying is much shorter. We would usually expect a Highways Act licence to take at least 28 days to be granted. Under this new regime, the consultation period is 7 days for any objections, and the authority must then determine the application within the following 7 days. So maximum 14 days before a licence would be granted under this new legislation. Not only that, but it's cheaper. We'd usually expect to see Highways Act application cost anything from a few £100s to, in some cases, thousands of pounds, depending on the size of the area. Local authorities are only permitted under this new regime to charge a maximum of a £100 fee, so a fairly significant reduction for many premises for the sorts of furniture that they want to use. So this is useful in that authorities are now going to be able to allow people to get their furniture out nice and quickly. So operators are going to be able to take advantage of the good weather quite quickly if we get some more of it, as is looking to be the case, and also take advantage of additional space that they can use within their area. We're finding that some customers tend to feel more comfortable outside. It also allows more space for more tables when obviously social distancing measures are restricting the number of tables that can be inside any premises. So really useful. These licenses will last anywhere between 3 months right up until the end of September 2021, and that will depend on the local authority in question, and the particular application process will vary from authority to authority as well. So obviously any operators with any queries on how this might work in their particular area and in relation to their particular premises can approach us, and we're more than happy to help with that process. Moving on then from the Business and Planning Act onto the catchy title here, the Health Protection Regulations. It doesn't sound particularly exciting, this. It isn't particularly nice and exciting, but it is something that operators do need to be aware of and to have in the forefront of their minds going forward. So what these regulations do is introduce sweeping enforcement powers for local authorities, fairly unprecedented in their scale, these powers, and fairly wide-ranging. So not something that any operator would want to be on the wrong end of, and therefore something to be very much aware of. So what these regulations do is they give local authorities the power to issue what's called a direction. A direction can impose restrictions, requirements or prohibitions on a licensed premises, in fact on any premises, also on events and even on public outdoor spaces. Now, these directions can impose restrictions, requirements, prohibitions in a variety of different ways. They might, for example, in a worst case scenario, just simply close a premises, or they might require restrictions on numbers, restrictions on entry to a premises, but they can do a wide variety of things, which could be really problematic to a licensed business. Now, a local authority can bring about a direction if they believe that there is a serious and imminent threat to public health, if they believe that it's necessary to prevent, to protect, to control, or to provide a public health response to an instance of COVID, and if they believe that the particular requirements of the direction are proportionate in relation to achieving that aim. So it's a fairly wide discretion. It's going to be up to authorities to consider whether those conditions are satisfied. Once a direction is imposed, it needs to be reviewed every 7 days. And if those conditions no longer apply, then the direction should be lifted. But obviously 7 days of closure could be really problematic for any premises. And it could be more than that. If an authority continues to believe that those measures, those requirements are met on a rolling 7-day basis, then a premises could find themselves closed for quite a significant period of time. Now, this could be used for a localised lockdown on a variety of premises, or could be used just for 1 or 2 individual premises if the way that they're trading has brought about concern to the authorities in terms of potential risks for infection or for lack of social distancing or whatever. So what we would be saying in relation to these is that operators need to consider whether they think things might be escalating or going the wrong way in terms of their relationship with authorities, in terms of the discussions that they're having with them. If authorities are starting to talk in such a way as it might make an operator think that they might be heading for a direction, they need to take advice very, very quickly on how to avoid that situation from escalating, negotiating with authorities, offering to voluntarily introduce measures rather than have them imposed upon them. Because once one of these directions is imposed, whilst there is a right of appeal, that appeal goes to the magistrates' court. The magistrates' courts are backlogged as a result of COVID, and things take a very long time to get through that court process in any case. So it's not a very palatable way out of this kind of situation. So it's best not to get into it in the first place if it can be avoided through partnership working with the authorities. And that's something that again, we're very happy to advise on and to consider the best way of helping operators to have a positive outcome from this sort of thing. Now, the authorities do also have their existing closure powers. There are powers of review in terms of licensed premises that remain and which have always been there. Reviews may be used more regularly, perhaps by local residents if they're concerned about the increase in activity in licensed premises in their area. And I think that's probably something that may become a key issue in relation to our discussion of the suburbs, and whilst they present opportunities, some of the issues that can be experienced in more residential suburbs versus city centres. But that brings to a close the legal update element here, and I'll hand back over to you, Felicity.
Thanks, Becky. We've just had a question in actually, which if I'll just read it out to you, it's probably best answered by you. Someone said, I have a few bars. If a local authority shuts one down, does it apply to that bar only or to all of my bars? Would my other venues be at risk?
No, so not necessarily. A direction would apply to wherever the local authority specify it to. So it's likely to be an individual premises. I suppose it's conceivable that if you've got a number of premises within a particular local authority area and an officer has got a concern about one, that might prompt them to go and do some visits to the others. But certainly it wouldn't automatically mean that you would end up with a direction in terms of all your premises. It would be specified within the particular direction where it applies to, and it would usually be an individual premises for a specific reason. But yeah, I suppose if it's an issue with your risk assessment or your way of trading or things that you haven't done, then it might prompt them to look into what you're doing elsewhere.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's not been that long since most bars and restaurants were allowed to reopen, but in terms of enforcement, I think we've seen so far relatively light touch approach to it. We've had some incidents of prohibition notices served on premises. For example, nightclubs at the moment aren't allowed to open. And so if one does, we did have an example of one that was trading more in the style of a nightclub than perhaps a bar, a prohibition notice was served to make sure that that particular operator operated like a bar, which is permitted. So we've seen a couple of those, but I think throughout the entire period of lockdown and emerging out of the other side, I think, Becky, you'd agree that we've seen an overwhelming sort of support from local authorities up and down the country. They've been very quick to try and help where they can. So they've, at the beginning of it, waived annual fees, deferred payments for tables and chairs licenses and that sort of thing. They've now moved very quickly to implement these pavement licenses. Manchester in particular have done quite a lot of work, particularly in the city centre, to get roads pedestrianised, blocked off, and tables and chairs outside to try and encourage more people back into town. And we've seen that replicated almost uniformly across the country, even with some local authorities who are more renowned for being restrictive and quite tricky to deal with. Even they've been receptive to this sort of thing. I think there is an acknowledgement across the country that the hospitality sector is so important to the economy and to how towns and cities function and thrive, that they've really been trying to do what they can, which actually probably brings me on to cumulative impact policies. Now, these aren't new. For anyone who doesn't know what one is, it's a policy brought in by a local authority that creates a presumption within certain specified areas against the grant of new licenses or against the grant of variations to existing licenses. Every city has got one, with the exception of Manchester in its city centre at least, and many, many towns have got them as well. And they create a real barrier to bars and restaurants entering an area, or once they're there, developing their premises, perhaps by getting later hours, perhaps by increasing their footprint, perhaps knocking through into an adjacent premises. And they're very difficult to overcome. They're not absolute, but it's a rebuttable presumption against the grant of changes or improvements to existing licenses. And Becky and I spend an awful lot of time trying to circumvent them, convince authorities that exceptions should be made for our clients. And we do have a lot of success doing that, but it is very difficult. It takes time, it's expensive, and it certainly acts as a deterrent to many people who perhaps don't have those resources available to them. But Bristol City Council have, in the last couple of weeks, announced that all of their cumulative impact policies, now they have several, they have a couple that cover the city centre, parts of the city centre there, and equally some others that incorporate some suburban locations, student areas and that sort of thing, where there's a high concentration of licensed premises. They've decided that as of the 1st of August, they will simply be removed. And so that barrier experienced by operators until that point will simply go. That's not to say that it becomes a free-for-all. You know, the police could still object, the environmental health team could still object, residents might not be happy with a particular application. They're still able to do that, but it just removes that initial barrier, that initial hurdle that operators need to overcome, which it's unprecedented. We've not seen that happen before. Bristol have rigorously upheld those policies in the past. You see varying degrees of adherence to those policies up and down the country. Some have them, but pay little regard to them. others are completely impenetrable. Westminster's, for example, is just, there's no way to get around it. They really uphold it. And Bristol have been very strict in how they've interpreted it. So to have them just signal their removal as of the 1st of August, I think is a big, big step. And I think other authorities will follow suit. When or where or how many, I suppose, remains to be seen. But I think it does send out a clear message that certain authorities, or Bristol City Council certainly, are looking to support operators. Now, there is talk that they might look to reimpose one that covers the city centre, but as of the 1st of August, there won't be any. And if they do want to reimpose one, they'll have to go through a full consultation process before they do that. So there is a large window of opportunity for operators down there, I think, to take advantage of that relaxation. I mentioned Manchester. Now, they are, we believe, the only city in the country that doesn't have a cumulative impact policy in the city centre, preferring instead just to rely on market forces, demand, just to let the nighttime economy develop a bit more organically, rather than create a sort of a fixed way of managing how people operate in a particular location. But they do have a policy in Fallowfield. They have a CIP in Fallowfield, and they have a slightly different stress policy in Withington, which isn't quite as strict, but it's the same sort of principle. It makes getting licenses in those areas more difficult. There's obviously a large student population in Fallowfield and Withington. There's also a large residential population. And I think the residents in that area have been very vocal in the past, which is probably what has prompted the introduction of this. But I think there's now a strong argument that a policy such as that is lifted, because it is such a barrier to operators, that now I would say is the time for policies such as those to be lifted or relaxed. So it might be a good idea to bring Lyndon in, because obviously he operates in Withington and elsewhere, and has had recent experience of dealing with and overcoming that particular policy. Just by way of introduction, I don't know if he needs an introduction really. These are just some of the companies of which he's involved. We couldn't fit all of them on the screen, but these are just a few. And Lyndon has just opened Southside in Withington, which is your second site in Withington.
It is, yeah, and my 14th site overall.
Yeah.
So yeah, busy. But yeah, I mean, the cumulative, I can't even say that word, the CIP for Withington, and okay, it's slightly different, isn't it? But, that was a real headache for Wilderness Record Store. And, as an operator, you have to look at, how you're going to make money, of course. And to open a record shop, turns out it's impossible to make money unless you're really, really, really good at it, which we're definitely not. And all we wanted was a license until 10 p.m. And that took us months, months and, a fair bit of money and court, and meeting lots of residents and people and civic society people along the way, some of which I'm still sure are very annoyed that we got the license. Thank you, guys. It was hard work. Southside to a lesser extent, because we just took on the license that was previously there. I think that the thing with out of town places, and we'll get on to opening a place in Suburbia soon, I'm sure, but it's really difficult, because when people kind of stop things, they're stopping bars and operators or restaurants opening and allowing other things to go in their place, like the 8th kebab house on the high street, or the 5th charity shop. And I don't have a problem with either of those things, but I'd probably not go to all of them on the same night or day. So stopping that is actually stopping areas thriving and opening. I think certainly down Burton Road, in West Didsbury, which is Withington, let's be honest. Down that road, you know, there's plenty of bars and restaurants, and it's thriving and it's great. And when you have the great bars and restaurants, you then get the great flower shops and the amazing, you know, homeware shops and everything else in between. And it allows it to thrive. It allows it to open. I mean, how do you distinguish what's going to be an awful shithole bar and an amazing restaurant? I mean, maybe, you know, that's for somebody to say, you know, kind of not you guys, but you guys. I mean, that's I guess something that's maybe needs to be done. You know, it's, you know, if it's an operator, you know, if Neil McLeod wanted to come over, or somebody, or, you know, myself, or Bo Myers, or anybody like that who's big in Manchester city centre, and they were refused, or they know they're going to have to spend thousands and months trying to get a license to do something which is essentially great for the area, they're not going to bother doing it again if they're refused, or they're not even going to try and do it in the first place. And I think that's certainly something that needs to be changed. Yeah,
and there are ways of making sure that the right operators come to the right parts of town. You can still check just with the normal licensing process,
yeah,
as to whether or not someone's going to be a welcome addition to an area without having that sort of artificial policy that prevents it just from straight away. So Withington, what made you choose Withington, first for Wilderness and now Southside?
I mean, I'd love to say something really good, but I'm currently in my house in Withington. I'm lazy. I mean, it kind of just fell into my lap, really. I love the area around here. You know, it's you get a lot more money for your, a lot more house for your money in Withington than you do in Didsbury. That's a whole other seminar, though. But you know, it's the little record shop round the corner, literally round the corner from my house. The girl who had it for ages just couldn't run it anymore. She couldn't afford to run it. You know, it kind of ticked along with her popping in every so often to open it, you know, and we decided, well, you know, I can't have that to be another kebab house or, you know, a pound shop or something just kind of awful, which is definitely not good for an area. So overnight, I kind of decided that I should be a record shop owner. And, you know, to do that, I mean, you know, you do have to add food and drink to that element to get it, you know, at least operating as well as you can. You know, it certainly doesn't make us any money, but it's really, really good for the area. You know, if we break even on that, that's a good week. In fact, it's an amazing week. But, you know, that's what the area needed. If I didn't jump in there and I didn't go for all that hard work to get the license so we can actually operate, because, you know, you want 2 members of staff in there at least. You know, you want it to be safe, you want all these things, but to be able to do that, you can't do that with making £2 on each record that you sell once every few days. You know, you've got to have other things to do it. So that it was out of necessity why I opened that, really. But I've not really looked back. I think everyone has just been really, really cool with it. You know, the sort of the community feel and the community aspect you get opening somewhere out of town. You know, of course, if I opened that in town, it would have been so much more busy. It would have been great. We might have even made some money. But, you know, you wouldn't get that community feel. You wouldn't get that whole thing. And, you know, it shows from the people who've gone over. And, you know, Jeff Smith was really helpful with us and the process of opening that. And, you know, he came in and had a few beers and I was trying to twist his arm to DJ. You know, things like that are great. And that's what we need in these little areas where, you know, they are struggling. They really are. But they're struggling now. But I think there's you know, there's a lot more to come from out of town places. And, you know, people are going to stick around where they live a lot more. I certainly am. You know, I don't want to be on public transport right now. And I don't really want to be in a taxi. And I rode to town once on a bike before lockdown. And my God, it's horrible. I don't know how people do it. I mean, it was a BMX, but I was knackered. I could barely drink my Guinness when I got to the pub. But I mean, I soldiered on. Well, anyway, sorry. What was the question?
I'm not sure there was one now. So obviously then Southside, did you plan on taking over that site before the pandemic and lockdown, or was it something that you did during?
I mean, there was drunken discussion, shall we say, before lockdown happened. And, you know, it was my local, it was Solomon's, and it's been my local since I moved here sort of 4.5 years ago. It's on the high street. It's a cool little place, but it was just awful. Sorry, but it was terrible. And you know, the lockdown, weirdly, you know, we have to think, you know, this is a horrible thing that's killed far too many people, and it's hideous, and everyone's struggling left, right, and centre, and things are bad. But there are some goods coming out of this, and I think the bits that you can take out of it that are good are just really nice, beautiful things that you kind of need for your soul, I think, more than anything else. And you know, when we sort of found out we're going on lockdown and it's going to be however long, you know, I thought it's probably going to be August, so I wasn't far off when we reopened. And I think we had a sort of a chat for about 5 minutes over the phone. I was like, look, let's just do it. Let's just turn it into a little tequila and taco bar. Let's call it Southside. Let's just do this work. And, you know, there was a lot of builders out of the work. There was a lot of people out of work. Nobody was really doing anything at the start. And, you know, to combat my boredom and losing my mind, I thought, you know, I will learn how to do a few things as well. So, you know, I did quite a lot of that work myself with builders and electricians doing the things that have to be done by builders and electricians, which I wouldn't touch either because they're quite scary. I don't like being electrocuted. But, you know, weirdly, it took us about 3 months. And that was kind of just in the right time whilst all this was happening, to do all of this, to get, you know, everything done and right, give or take everything done right, to reopen. And, you know, we've been open since the Wednesday after we were allowed, so whatever date that was it the 9th or the 10th or something? I don't know. And it's the first 5 days of opening, Wednesday to Sunday, we took more on that day, on that week, than Solomon's has ever taken, you know, ever. And that was like, well, that's really good. And, you know, of course, that was the opening week. But still, it's doing, the second week was the second best Solomon that you know, Solomon's has ever done. So, you know, it's working really well. The sort of the people who live around here, I'm hoping they're loving it. You know, all of a sudden, it's a strange one, opening a site and going kind of a bit weird with it and saying, you know, let's have 200 tequilas behind the bar, you know, and trying to get people in who hate tequila and teaching people, actually, you don't really hate tequila, you just add awful tequila. There's some delicious stuff. Try some of this. And people have kind of come to it with their eyes open and really love it. You know, and this is the best I've ever seen any bar, including all the ones in town. We're selling more margaritas than we sell house beer at the moment, on a week by week basis, which is crazy. It's unheard of, and it's amazing. So it's really, you know, it's just really hit the ground running. And this is before restrictions are lifted as well. So as soon as that happens, you know, it's gonna be doing more, and it, you know, it'll really cement itself in the community. And what it needs is other bars around it like that. It needs other operators to come in and go, this is a cool place to open somewhere. You know, it's only 4 miles out of town, and it works. There's enough people here. There's a lot of people as well coming from town to come, or, you know, or live on the outskirts of town, actually coming to Southside, and they spend longer there because, you know, there's a couple of cool pubs around here, really cool pubs. The Albert, the best Guinness, I believe, in Manchester. And the Vic, which is a great pub as well. But, you know, this is the only real bar there. So you have another 2 or 3 bars, and all of a sudden you've got a great area, and, you know, then you get the restaurateurs in, and then you get, hopefully, the florist in, and the great butchers, and the, you know, everything else. So it's going well.
There's a question that's just been posed. How does opening a site in the suburbs differ from opening in the city? Is it easier, harder? For example, finding staff, promotion? And I think, well, if you want to answer that, I think we'll probably come on to how you're finding trade generally in the city centre now in a post-lockdown world.
Yeah. I think opening in the suburbs, and, you know, we had, I'm going to kind of contradict myself with these two things here. We had the record store first, which was very, very easy to open a record store, very, very difficult to get a license because it didn't have one previously. Now, opening Southside, you know, there was little to no red tape at all. It was really, really, really easy. I think opening in town compared to opening in the suburbs, there's always going to be more red tape. Add to that rent's cheaper when you move out of town. It really, really is. And you know, the whole, I guess it's the whole community vibe as well. And we do have that with some of our places in town. There's a strong community and a strong connection. You know, the customers really feel like it's their own place. But you automatically get that in the suburbs. So in opening it, it was, I mean, literally, it was like, should we do this? Yeah. I mean, we did have licensing come in 2 hours before we opened to say that we'd not put a variation in. Oops. But that's all in now. Thank you, Kuits. And that's all absolutely fine. But, you know, even speaking to him, you know, everything was okay. You know, things are, people kind of want you to open places in the suburbs as well. So a lot of the councillors here have been really, really good. The likes of Chris Wills has been really, really helpful with both of those sites because they want it. It helps them out. It helps the area out. It cuts down on, you know, it cuts down on crime if you get loads more places opening and things like this. It helps everything else out. But the short answer is it's easier to open in the suburbs unless you probably want to get a license, which isn't already there. And we still got it anyway. It was just a bit of a pain.
Yeah. And I think now the position we find ourselves in now is that there is a greater will, I think, from authorities to encourage bars and restaurants to open up, where just a few months ago perhaps that wasn't there. So yeah. I think we're seeing operators applying for things now that they wouldn't have got a few months ago, or applying for changes to their licenses now under a minor variation, which a few months ago would have required a full variation, which is obviously longer and more expensive as a process. So there isn't a better time, I don't think, for operators to look at new sites or perhaps look at the licenses that they've got and change them, because there's definitely a softening, I think, from some of the enforcement authorities. Things are slightly easier now.
There's a softening, and they're all working a lot better and quicker together as well, aren't they? And you know, which is, whilst it's a good thing, it's a mildly annoying thing as well, because if you can do it now, you know, why can't you make it that quick all of the time? You know, but I do think it's a great time to be doing things like this. It's also a time where actually, if you're operating a business and you're not very good at it, unfortunately, this is where you're going to come unstuck a little bit. And, you know, it is a test of people's, like, of how good they are at doing things, basically. And if you fail, if you do that, then, I mean, it's a sad thing if people are going to lose sites and stuff like this, which, you know, I hope to God nobody does, because the more sites and the more things, the better for everyone. But if people do, there's then going to be potentially great sites in places you've never been able to get them.
There's another question, Lyndon, again, sort of focusing on the city centre. Why do you think that the city centre trade generally struggles midweek, even pre-COVID? Saturation, lack of USPs, people preferring to eat, drink near their homes. Do you think there was a problem with midweek trade in the city centre?
I mean, obviously the simple answer is because people have days off at the weekend, so you can get leathered. I during all of this, I honestly believe, and I think that, you know, the government should be pushing 7-day weeks so people work on any given day in the week. I believe that you know, everyone should be pushing. You know, you have 2 days off, but you can have Monday and Tuesday off, or, you know, somebody else has, you know, offices can do this quite easily. The fact that people are working from home is really, really, really bad for a lot of places where they are very reliant on awful people in suits drinking in their bars. Thankfully, none of mine are those places. And sorry, I know you guys wear suits all the time normally. But sorry, I mean, I do think in the week there's always going to be quiet. I would say, you know, putting offers on is always a good thing to put offers on, but as soon as you put that offer on, you can never remove it. So even if you're doing pretty well and your offer's too good, you're kind of just busy fools then, just doing something to have a full bar. What I've seen and what I kind of did really sort of think would happen is, after lockdown, our weekday trade everywhere is up. everywhere across all sites, and on the weekends it's down of course, because I think people are a lot more into going to town when they feel it's going to be quieter, and they don't want to go out when it's really crazy busy. And I totally get that sentiment as well. I also follow that sentiment. I don't want to go out on a weekend. I don't know. The general public are very strange people as well, where, you know, I've had perfect examples of this for years. And if there's a queue outside Mojo and there's no queue at Liars Club, people will join the queue rather than go into the place where you can get into, and vice versa. There's a queue at Liars Club and none at Mojo. They won't go to Mojo. They'll queue up for an hour to get into Liars. I'm like, I don't get it. I really don't get it. I want to get my drink as soon as possible and drink it. But yeah, it's the only way to stop it is by removing weekends, and I think it could be quite an easy thing to do. I don't know. I'm not in the government, but surely these things are easier than they make them out.
Perhaps you should be. I'm just thinking about city centres. We're doing quite a lot, and we're sitting on a few boards and business groups about the city centre, discussing the city centre ecology, and how at the moment, Manchester specifically, but you know, it's true of every city, that without office workers in offices, you haven't then got sandwiches being purchased at lunchtime, you haven't got after work pints or meals and that sort of thing. I think I heard it said that if for every one office worker, there are 5 service workers supported by them. But at the moment, I mean, the guidance is that if people can work from home, they should, although I think we're probably expecting that message to change slightly in the next month or two. I don't know if you've got any ideas about how we can reinvigorate city centres. Number One Spinningfields apparently has space for 2,500 people when it's fully occupied, but at the moment there's no more than 120 odd, I think, going in on any given day, and that obviously has a huge knock-on effect. But if we haven't got international or even domestic tourists, no football, certainly without crowds, and events and concerts, then you haven't got those people coming in either. My thinking is that they're all interconnected, and that city centres only thrive when everyone is playing their part and doing their bit. But have you got any ideas about how?
Well, I mean, venue-wise, you know, Spinningfields is the one that's really struggling here. I mean, they kind of cater for just that specific crowd, and I think they always have. And you know, I going out looking like a scruffy idiot with my shorts on and flip-flops when everyone's looking really neat next to me, it doesn't, you know, it's a bit odd, I find. So, you know, I think if you cater solely for football, like some bars do, if you cater solely for after work drinks, which some bars do, all these things, if you just cater for one specific thing, and those people aren't there, it's time to either, well, try and hold it out until these people come back, or change things. You know, make it a bit looser, make it a bit more fun for people, make it less football-y and more welcoming for this and the other. I don't know. I mean, I think, you know, a lot of my places are doing okay. You know, some of them are doing actually better than they were, and I think it's because we kind of, you know, I wouldn't necessarily cater for everyone, but, you know, we're not aiming towards a specific type of client coming in, and it's so difficult because without football and things, which I hate, but without football, the city centre is quieter. Without concerts on, the city centre is quieter. You know, you know, on a busy weekend when there's Spice Girls playing at the arena, and there's a boxing match on at 2 a.m, and Manchester United and City are both playing at home, or this, that, and the other. It's bustly. I mean, it's almost too busy, at times. But it's going to be that. So obviously the influx with people coming in to watch these things is huge. Those things aren't happening at the moment. So if you have literally no customers now, then your customers essentially have to be some of these people, office workers, sports fans, or people from out of town who go to watch gigs. I mean, obviously, I'm generalising here. There's a few more things. So, why aren't the people who live in the city centre coming to your bars as well? Why aren't that should everyone should go to visit all of the bars in Manchester. I try my best to, and I think maybe you do need to look at things a bit like that. And I know it's difficult to do that. You can't pick up where you are if you've got thousands and thousands of people around you all the time. You can't move that venue. So how do you get other people in? I mean, I don't know the answer to that, by the way, but
I suppose there's been a series of government initiatives that might have helped. I mean, you've taken advantage in the northern quarter of outdoor space, haven't you? Putting table chairs outside on pedestrianised streets. I don't know what you're doing about the VAT cut, whether you're passing that on to customers or not. No. And then and the Eat Out to Help Out scheme.
It's a strange name, and I think we all think the same when we say it. I mean, the VAT cut, in my eyes, has always been for the operator, because operators are struggling, and I think I've been lucky with some of my sites. Speaking to other operators, I know, places in London, they're running at 50%, and that's on a good week. At 50%, it's difficult to carry on. A lot of my places, I'll tell you now because I've got them written here. Cane and Grain is up by 3.28% on last year, which is amazing. That's really good, but massively helped out with the outside seating that we've got outside. We've got 8 or 10 tables out there, which without that, we'd obviously be operating at a loss. Or not a loss, but would have been down on last year's like for like. Now it's running at 3.28% more than last year, which is spectacular. The issue with that is the wage percentage is going up massively because you need to attend to customers a lot more. We need to sit a lot more people down. You have to, all of these different things. You need more staff basically to take less money. And everywhere is seeing that. Everywhere knows now that we're in the process of hiring more staff because we need it, which is it's a great thing. It's a good thing, and I'm very, very happy to pay more for my staff, which makes sure that the venue's running okay, and we're making sure customers are great. The customers in Hull and in general have been amazing, but you can imagine at 2 a.m, it's a bit like herding cats, trying to get people to sit in the same spot and do things like this when they're used to dancing on tables, and it is this thing that we're going to swallow a little bit. And I've always thought that VAT reduction is kind of there to soak up these costs, which we're having to take anyway. So it's a really good thing to do from the government. I know it's been slightly misconstrued in the press, where it's saying, well, certain places aren't going to pass that on to the customer. Well, it's not for us to pass it to the customer. There's other things in place, like the Eat Out to Help Out to Eat Out, whatever it is thing, which is really, really good for certain venues. And I think some of my venues might struggle with this. I'm hoping people will still come in and take full advantage of 50% off food and soft drinks Monday to Wednesday. But if I was going out, I'd eat at a place where I'd normally spend 40 quid on a meal or something like that, rather than some of my places. In fact, most of my places are kind of quite cheap for food. Bunny Jackson's 10p wings is ridiculous. We run at a loss on the food on that, but the booze sales prop that up. It's a bit of a loss leader, which has worked a treat. But doing this and giving the customers this, I think it probably will take away from some of mine, annoyingly, but it will also get more people out, which is I will do well from. And I think we're all going to do really, really well from that. But again, I'm Monday to Wednesday, those days are kind of doing pretty good, and then Friday and Saturday they're nowhere near. They're not far off each other, to be honest. all weeks reasonably, we have a little creep up on Friday and Saturdays, where it's normally like this, and then Friday and Saturday pays for the whole week. That's what every bar operates like. I know restaurants are slightly different, but yeah, eat out to help out will be good for everyone, but maybe, you know, you'll get a bit more trade, or more people will be actually out on the Monday to Wednesday. Yeah. And I might as well carry on with these figures because they're looking right at me here. So it's an interesting one, which we're still working out how to do, or why it's like this. But Cane and Grain's up by 3%. Both Pedros in Manchester are down 34.5%. Bridge Street, 26.79% in the northern quarter. And then Pedros Tavern is up 30%, which is amazing. That is purely due to the fact that people all of the time sit in there anyway. It's a pub, so you sit down anyway. So yes, we've lost some standing in there, but not a huge amount. And then add to that, we've got outside seating, which is extra. It's really boosted our trade. It's amazing. It's spectacular. Long may that stay on Thomas Street. Crazy Pedros Liverpool is up 5%. That's because there's a big outside area there, so people are using that more often. And Bunnies is down 5%, which is pretty bloody good. The only two that are bad there really are the Crazy Pedros, and you know, you've all been to those places, hopefully, and they're tiny inside, you know, so we don't really have that many seats inside. You know, I think Bridge Streets we can have 40 people in. So if it's raining, we can serve 40 people. You know, it's inevitable that that's going to be down. We can't do anything about it. We are trying to extend the outside a little bit as well, but you know, they don't read that bad. I was expecting worse. I really was, and I'm hoping that everyone else is kind of finding the same thing. You know, I think the government and the council have helped massively, especially on Thomas Street, with extending that area. You know, they've closed the road. Well, they closed it previous, but you know, the road's just been sat there as a closed road. Crazy. So yeah, they're allowing us to do this and put planters outside and do all these things, and it's really made a difference. And I think, you know, that saying about that's, you know, for 3 months, but it could be for longer. I think, you know, we should be pushing for things like this to be indefinite. Okay, yeah, you know, you can, like you say, you can lose your license if something goes bad, or you take the piss out of it, then of course you should lose that. And, you know, you lose your outside bit, and then you'll lose your license eventually. That's how it should be. Any operator knows that. But if you're making it work for you, for the customers, and let's remember that all of this, what we're doing is we've got a duty of care to our staff and our customers, you know, in equal measures. And if we can't space people out, and if we can't do this, and we can't keep people in jobs, and we can't do everything else, then, you know, it's all kind of going to fail, isn't it? So there's lots and lots of good, like I say, with things, but we just need, you know, that'd be awful if they take that off us in January. I think it'd be just the biggest backstep ever, and a dreadful one.
Yeah, I think the genie's out the bottle slightly there, isn't it? And it's shown that it works, and it's been a success. And if that continues, I think there'd be a flaw, wouldn't there, if they took it away. I'm just conscious of time, and we've got 2 other questions. So I don't know if I just read these out to you, Lyndon. You've probably got about a minute on each, if that's all right. Okay. I'll just take them out of order. How do you go about researching sites and availability, or find out what might be coming available soon? Do you use an agent, lawyer, or do you just go and have a look around? Or keep your...
Very different, sort of a bit of finger on the pulse with lots of things to find out what's going on. We use, for our bigger sites, OBI, who are really good at finding sites throughout the country. But to the most part, kind of having 14 sites, you kind of get an email and somebody goes, there's a site. It's a case of doing that, or, you know, visiting lots of different cities, which is always good fun, and going to many different bars and restaurants you've not been to, and asking around there. But there's no real sort of hard and fast rules to it.
Perfect. And then from Jeff at GF Holding, hi Jeff. They're contractors which are heavily involved in the licensed trade and hospitality sector. He says, leisure has never experienced a downturn of this nature. When do you feel that investment in future projects will return or start back up again?
I I would say, I mean, there were certain bars I signed on the dotted line on before all this happened, which are taking quite a while to come through now, and we had to. Junkyard, Newcastle, for instance, we were due to start on that. Well, we'd have been working on it now. That's 12 months, been pushed back 12 months. I think without having the ability to do the work yourself and cutting down on a bit of, unfortunately, like Jeff's stuff, because that's the only way I could have done Southside at the time. People are going to keep their money in their back pockets a little bit, I think. And I think, it's a really difficult one. I think you need to see a real sort of upturn for anybody to feel safe about, doing a brand new site and spending £500,000 or £1 million on it. Well, I would say probably 12 months down the line.
Yeah. And I suppose the last one from me, have you got any immediate plans to do something sooner, smaller, suburban based? Or
I have. Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about doing a Pedros takeaway, Crazy Pedros takeaway for some time. And this probably seems like probably the best time to ever do it. We have got a site that we're nearly there with in Withington on the high street again. And we're going to call it Pedros Loco. So it's, the idea is to do open 10, 20 of these things. So actually, going back to Jeff's question, I think the bigger sites are going to be difficult to do, but the smaller sites and takeaways and things like this, which I really, really think people should be doing, and bigger operators looking down that sort of smaller route is definitely a way forward.
And there's just one final, it's not really a question, it's more of a statement. Someone anonymously says that Ramsbottom needs a good proper bar, just saying.
I agree. Yes, I think there's a lot of places out there like Ramy, which need lots of cool little independent people to go over and open little bars. And I think I'm currently now looking further afield for these things, because you do get that community feel and spirit and everything. And you've got an instant local and you've got instant regulars as soon as you open the doors, which you take years to do in town if you ever get to that point.
I think that probably wraps things up. So thank you very much, Lyndon.
Thanks for having me.
Really, really insightful and really intriguing. So I'll just hand back over to Tom.
Thanks, Felicity, and thanks, Lyndon. I'm sure everyone will agree that was absolutely fascinating. Really, really interesting insight into what's happening in the market, and we'll see what happens moving forward. So I appreciate we've gone past 3 o'clock, so thanks to everybody who's still on the webinar for sticking with us. Just finally, to wrap it up, I just wanted to mention that Kuits currently has a redundancy support package, which our employment team is working with leisure and licensing clients on. Obviously, we don't want to see anybody making redundancies. Unfortunately, in this time of this pandemic, it's kind of inevitable for some operators, and there are kind of opportunities there with the furlough scheme to put redundancy packages in place. So there's some contact details on screen there for our employment team, and that is something that we'd be more than happy to speak to anybody about and offer an initial consultation on. And just finally to say, again, thanks to Felicity, Becky and Lyndon for giving up their time this afternoon. And if anybody on the call has any further questions or queries that they want to put to us, feel free to get in touch at any time. And yeah, thanks again for your time this afternoon. I hope you found that as useful as I did, and we'll be back in touch again soon with another leisure and licensing update. So please keep your eyes peeled for that. But in the meantime, we'll speak soon. Thank you very much.
Cheers.